Omaha's news leader, chronicling the stories and people making a difference in our community. This is KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle.
Good morning and welcome to KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And while the month is coming to an end, the fight to prevent that terrible crime never stops. The Nebraska nonprofit Rejuvenating Women says almost 25 million people worldwide are denied freedom because of trafficking, and 1 in 4 children are victims of what's being called modern slavery. Well, Governor Pete Ricketts says the state is beefing up its efforts to end trafficking in Nebraska. KETV News Watch 7's Jonah Gilmore reported on that announcement and how the state is making progress catching traffickers. But there's more to be done.
So we are officially proclaimed.
The state's efforts to combat human trafficking are ramping up.
Human trafficking is a modern form of slavery.
Tuesday, Governor Pete Ricketts is dedicating an entire month to raising awareness.
It is despicable and is something that shows a sickening disregard for human dignity.
He says one of the key components to ending human trafficking, knowing what to look for.
Something just doesn't seem right. People who don't have control of their IDs or their credit cards or their phones, things like that.
The state has allocated a 3-year grant totaling $1.5 million to develop and enhance statewide trafficking task forces.
There's a tremendous amount of work that leads up to a conviction, and there's great teamwork that's required to bring these cases to fruition.
The ultimate goal is to ensure safety and put the traffickers away.
It's not easy. A human trafficking victim takes a lot of time to get them back to a state of mind that they, basically understand the importance of their own human dignity.
Ricketts says even after the trafficking is caught, the work doesn't stop there.
I think that what we got to remember is that this is something that we need to continually be fighting.
Jonah Gilmore, KETV News Watch 7.
Now, in 2015, the Attorney General's office formed a statewide human trafficking task force. Last year, I sat down with Glenn Parks. He's the coordinator of the task force and an assistant attorney general to get details on the extent of human trafficking in Nebraska, what it looks like. Well, I talked with him the other day to get an update on the state's response to the crime. In 2018, there were 12 prosecutions. In 2019, 8. In 2020, there were 22 prosecutions, and Park says last year, the same number.
Now, Rob, I want to clarify this increase in prosecution. I do not think reflects an increase in trafficking. I think there's a lot going on, and so I want to caveat that I'm actually pleased with the numbers. As we put in, we have a 2021 update that's available on the AG's website, and in that we mentioned that over half of the 79 prosecutions so far under state law happened in the last 2 years. And I'm not sure if your news channel has covered it or not, but we had a pandemic going on. And so I'm really actually quite pleased with the team. We haven't been doing proactive operations like we used to do before that. And so that's one source of us uncovering this stuff. And so in spite of that, in spite of all the things that we have to deal with, we have, hit a stride, I think, with finding and uncovering more and more of the sex trafficking and prosecuting it for what it is.
Well, let's talk about the trafficking. Where is it happening?
Great question. So as all of your viewers would imagine, it does happen in Omaha and in Lincoln. But I think one thing I really like to emphasize is that this is not just a big city problem. We have had investigations covering almost every part of the state of human trafficking as labor and sex trafficking. And now we have had prosecutions all across the state. In the report, we have a map that shows this. But right now we've had 79 prosecutions begun. 24 of them are still pending. They're in places like Gering and Scotts Bluff out in the Panhandle. We have one in York, in Aurora. We have some in a place called Oxford, which is a small town in south central Nebraska. There's one in Kearney, a couple in Grand Island. So these are prosecutions. This is where the prosecutor has enough evidence that they believe that they're going to be able to convince a jury or a judge beyond a reasonable doubt that this happened. And so I think this is, the tip of the iceberg of what's actually happening.
Last year we discussed the difference between sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Which one is more prevalent? I imagine it's sex trafficking.
That's an excellent question. I think it's probably labor trafficking, but I don't know that for certain. There is, I don't know if it's a consensus, but of people in the nation that look at trafficking, I think there's an understanding it's at least as bad labor trafficking. It's much harder to find, however. As you can imagine, commercial sex, to have a sex trafficking ring that's profitable, you have to have a number of customers come. And so you have to advertise, and that's exposed to law enforcement. Law enforcement can pretend to be some of those customers. On the other hand, labor trafficking can happen when someone has a person in their home who cooks and does their laundry. That person may never see the public. You could have some people working on your farm in the middle of 1,000 acres, and just they would never have interaction with the public or with anyone else. And so that makes it harder to uncover. We do have some initiatives, and there's some ways around that. And I think that's one thing that I'm looking forward to in 2022. We're doing we have some active investigations and some initiatives that I won't go into detail about, but on labor trafficking. And I think I'd like to predict right here on your show that 2022 is, I think, going to be the year that we have our first labor trafficking prosecution under state law.
Can you walk me through what happened? What's the process for investigating a case? A call comes in to local law enforcement or to the task force. What happens next?
Sure. So I'll start actually with what's a typical example. This isn't always the way it happens, but if a member of the public sees something that maybe they've watched this program, or they've gotten a little bit of training and they know some of the signs and the dynamics, and if they call the 800 number that we use, it can be used anywhere in the United States. But if you say you're in Nebraska, they'll take that information and they send an email to myself in the AG's office, FBI, Homeland Security, and the State Patrol. And we immediately decide which agency is going to investigate that. It's a system that's worked very well for many years.
Anything the community can do to help you?
Yes, I think every one of your viewers can play a role, or a potential role. And I think this starts with educating ourselves. So I really encourage people just to take even 20 minutes to do an internet search of sex trafficking tips or signs. Every person here has a community, and they go to a grocery store, and they go to their church, and they go to their park, and they know what's normal, what's a normal car driving by and what isn't. And that's a kind of information that sometimes law enforcement doesn't even have. We can't be everywhere, and we don't actually know the dynamics. And especially if you're a teacher or a nurse or someone that has, you have next door neighbors with kids or something, you can keep an eye out, and when something is different, and you can have a sense of what's wrong. And if it meets or feels like it has the elements of sex or labor trafficking, then I highly encourage them to call the number and report it. We'd rather have 100 false positives, meaning you call it in and we realize it was nothing, than for someone to kind of hesitate, even though they have seen something, on that to be an actual case where we could have made a difference.
Posters went up last year in the state's rest areas across the state, not only to help victims and people possibly get away, but also to send a message to traffickers and would-be traffickers. You said something that stuck with me. You said, the future is bright to make Nebraska a hostile place to do human trafficking. So in your opinion, is Nebraska now a more hostile place to do trafficking?
I think that's objectively true, Rob, because of the convictions we've had. I'm certain that traffickers talk to each other, and they read the papers, and they know their friends who've gotten caught and prosecuted for this. I want to make sure I don't communicate. I think we've arrived, or we've got our handle on it, and we're finding most of it. But I do think the momentum we've had in the past couple years, and the somewhat high-profile cases we've had, I think word's getting out that this is not something we're going to turn a blind eye to anymore. It used to be easier and less risky to traffic human beings than it does drugs. If you get pulled over for speeding and you have a bunch of meth in your front seat, you're in big trouble. If you have 3 teenagers in your car, that's not really an issue yet. There's nothing illegal going on. We need to know something else. And so I think I have heard across the country that even gangs were moving some of their operations, more of their operations away from drugs and toward human trafficking for that reason. The added reason is, of course, you can sell a human being over and over, where you can sell drugs only once.
So finally, then, in your opinion, are we on the right track?
We are on the right track. I feel I'm excited about 2022. I'm pleased with what we've done the last couple of years as far as getting more and more people involved in understanding what's going on and getting law enforcement to recognize it and prosecutors to being willing to prosecute it as it is. And I think the state has some momentum. I'd really like to build on that because, like I said, we're not out of the woods yet. We're not finding most of it, but I think we're going in the right direction.
And you can help. Here's another look at how to report suspected cases of human trafficking. You can call 1-888-373-7888, text 233-733, or if you want to chat live with someone, at humantraffickinghotline.org. All of these are available 24/7. They are confidential. If you need to see these again, we'll have them in this story on KETV.com. Just look for Chronicle. You can also search for our interview with Glenn Parks from last year to learn more about the face of human trafficking in Nebraska. All right, still ahead, the recovery process for survivors of human trafficking, how one nonprofit is extending a helping hand, and how you can get involved. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle.